In retrospect, Chocobo Racing looks like a bit of a strange game to come from the house of Final Fantasy. This family-friendly, character-based kart racer was released in 1999, and it strikes a strong contrast against other now classic Squaresoft titles released by the developer. This includes Chocobo Racing director Takashi Takita's previous effort, the grim dystopian set action RPG Parasite Eve. But if we zoom out, we see that Chocobo Racing may not be such an odd duck after all. The publisher's catalog in the 90s was full of experiments in different genres and games with varying tones aimed at a wider audience. A kart racer with Final Fantasy characters? It doesn't seem so strange when placed next to the 3D arena brawler Ehrgeiz, God Bless the Ring, which included Final Fantasy VII protagonists Cloud and Tifa amongst its roster of fighters. Zoom even further out and we see an industry that was increasingly trying to capitalize on the recent craze for kart racers. Chocobo Racing sought to make the most of the successes of Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing by bringing the kart racing genre to the PS1. In other words, Chocobo Racing is a game that's very much a product of its time. I have fond memories of renting the game and running it through its paces for weekends at a time. But more than 20 years after its initial release, can this easygoing kart racer hold up? Or does it remain a minor footnote in Squaresoft's very impressive 32-bit catalog? On paper, Chocobo Racing offers a substantial number of ways to play the game. The genre standard time attack mode is an option, so too is the Grand Prix mode, where you can take on other racers across your choice of 4 of the game's racetracks. In relay mode, you pass the baton between 3 characters in a one-off race. Recent circumstances have meant that I couldn't make as much use of the game's split-screen competitive multiplayer as I would have liked in this re-encounter with Chocobo Racing. Instead, I found myself gravitating most to the game's story mode, which presents itself in the form of a pop-up book. The story, narrated by Sid, is altogether as thin as you might expect for a racing game aimed at a young audience. Sid has given Chocobo a pair of jet blades to test out at his racetrack. You then depart on your adventure, a set of races strung together by the narrative conceit that you're finding different magicite shards that confer special abilities to your racer. You begin your adventure with only Chocobo and his dash ability available to select. Each subsequent race introduces new characters with new abilities. As you race and defeat Mog, Chubby Chocobo, the Black and White Mages, and a host of other Final Fantasy side characters that make up the default 8-character roster, each on their own themed tracks, they join your party and you gain their abilities, concluding in a final race against the winged Bahamut. The story rapidly devolves into a formulaic affair involving bringing together all the magicite shards to form the magicite crystal and restore harmony to the world through cooperation or something. I'm never quite sure why it is that sports games or kart racers like this feel the need to come up with convoluted story reasons to convince their young audience that their racing is needed to bring peace and joy to the universe. I never once stopped myself when playing Super Mario Kart for the SNES to ask what world-ending drama has compelled Yoshi to hop in his go-kart to save the universe, tossing banana peels at all those who follow in his wake. But perfunctory storyline aside, the pop-up book presentation is pleasantly rendered in its own simplistic and unoffensive way. The 10 racetracks of Chocobo Racing offer a decent amount of visual variety, from the earthy mines of Chapter 4 to the world of Chubby Chocobo with retaining walls made of chocolate cake. The issue is that the course designs don't offer much variety in terms of gameplay. The Castle Racetrack stands alone in offering something of a dynamic element to races, a cage that drops down to block or possibly even trap racers as they make a 90-degree left turn burn through a band of special items. Otherwise, the courses are a monotonous affair and don't themselves pose much of a challenge. Different racers have different attributes, as you'd expect from a character-based kart racer. The trouble is that the course designs don't give you any real reason to change to different characters to suit the particular needs of the track. Certainly you could pick Gollum or Chubby Chocobo in hopes that their sturdy frames could help you more securely navigate the track, but you may as well just stick to the all-arounder Chocobo, who is sufficiently speedy and has aggressive braking that allows you to whip around any tight corner the game would throw at you. About the only gameplay reason you might want to select someone other than Chocobo arrives when you unlock either of the game-breaking mages. I'm sure there are subtle differences between the white and black mage, but the most important attribute of both characters is that they float above the track, and it feels like you can even zip over curbs without being slowed down, making even easier this already undemanding kart racer. As you progress through the story mode, you gain more abilities that you can pick and choose from at the beginning of each race. As with your choice of character, it's rare that you'll want to give up the evergreen dash ability that you have from the very beginning of the game. The first batch of abilities you collect are positively useless, like Mug, which allows you to steal a spell from the racer in front of you, and it's only until you gain an ability like Magic Plus, which levels up your collected spell, that you might decide to forego dash. As you zip around the track, you can collect magic stones that allow you to cast spells on yourself and your opponents. The spells in Chocobo Racing won't come as a surprise to anyone who has spent even a cursory amount of time with, frankly, any kart racer. Fireballs, thunder strikes, ice sheets that act like oil slicks, and the ability to shrink other racers. You can level up your spells if you have the Magic Plus ability or by collecting multiple magic stones. I have to admit, I couldn't help but chuckle when I saw in the manual that the leveled up versions of these spells follow the Final Fantasy naming convention: Blizzard, Blizzara, Blizzaga, and so on. Fan service aside, the weapons are all just standard fare, and they don't add much complexity to this otherwise by-the-book racer. The sound design of Chocobo Racing is, if not good, then mostly unoffensive. The background music, composed by industry veteran Kenji Ito and with original compositions from legendary Squaresoft composer Nobuo Uematsu, keeps an appropriately upbeat tempo with occasional flourishes based on the theme of the level, like the Halloween vibes in the music for the Spooky Castle racetrack. Some standard Final Fantasy themes are liberally deployed in the hopes of making Chocobo Racing look brighter in the reflection of the venerable RPG series, such as in the use of the victory music after you win a race. The overall effect is rather like a pared down version of a Final Fantasy official soundtrack. Take the orchestra, toss out half the instruments, hand the musicians the back of the envelope compositions that haven't been worked out and fine-tuned, and press the record button. There isn't any composition that's particularly bad, but there isn't anything particularly memorable either. The same can't be said for the sound effect work, which can be positively grating. Most, if not all, the karts have an engine sound that is comprised of maybe 1 or 2 samples that are played on loop again and again. Chubby Chocobo is a particularly egregious example of this. His cart squeaks under the weight of this rotund warbler, but if you take the lead and put any sort of distance between yourselves and your opponents, and the squeaks will ingrain themselves into the very core of your eardrums. Another example of this is the Black Mage, whose cloud cart makes a sputtering sound like a never-ending series of soap bubbles popping. Combine these repetitious sounds with the harsh screeching sound of braking, which is necessary to drift around corners, and you have a truly noxious soundscape. This speaks to a sound design that was either hastily put together or never fully considered as a whole. Here's a particularly telling detail. It befuddles me that all the vehicles or flying characters, whether the cloud cart of the Black Mage, the flying carpet of the White Mage, or Bahamut himself, all make the sounds of screeching tires against asphalt when you decelerate, despite the fact that none of these characters ever even touch the ground. All of the cute chocobo sounds ripped straight from Final Fantasy games just can't overcome these issues in sound design, and they offer yet another reason why you'll find yourself sticking to Chocobo as your main character. At the very least, the engine sound of Chocobo's jet blades won't have you reaching for the mute button on your remote. All told, the story mode in Chocobo Racing will take you about an hour to complete. If you go through the game again, you'll unlock more characters that you can choose to use in the game's different modes. Somewhere hidden in my game collection, I have a memory card with unlocks of Squall, Cloud riding the Hardy Daytona, and a police car that allegedly has Aya Brea from Parasite Eve at the wheel. But that suggests to me that the Chocobo Racing developers didn't quite know for whom the game was being made. On the one hand, the game skims the top layer of Final Fantasy games with references to that series' lore, music, and design, and plops them into a kart racer. Running through the story mode 6 times will give you Cactuar, for instance, as a playable character. Surely unlocking characters like Cactuar or Aya Brea will be only a meaningful reward or achievement to players with extensive experience of playing Squaresoft's back catalog of games. But on the other hand, the gameplay design seems to be aimed at being a very rudimentary kart racer, something that young audiences without such an experience of Squaresoft's games could handle without much fuss. While Nintendo particularly managed to craft easy to learn but difficult to master kart racers, Chocobo Racing finds itself in an awkward position where only the most dedicated of Squaresoft fans will find any reason to trudge through this quite simplistic game for the most meager of rewards. Chocobo Racing is ultimately a fairly average game. And I think perhaps that's actually one of the reasons why it's worth playing again. We have a habit of thinking of a game console's legacy or eras of video games in stark contrasts, in the bright highlights of games with epic stories and genre-defining gameplay, the Final Fantasies and Metal Gear Solids. These titles we hold against the darkness of the abyss of games that are broken, catastrophic failures, your Bubsy 3Ds or Superman 64s, which we laugh at and mock, often with pretty good reasons. That said, for most of us, and for most of the time, we played games that were dead average, run-of-the-mill. Games that we've hardly paid any mind to since we first played them. Chocobo Racing did not win any game awards, and it isn't a hidden gem. It is a deeply flawed game. There are better kart racers, both in 1999 and being made today. That's not to say that Chocobo Racing is without its merits. I zoned out as I cut across corners despite the screeching sounds of my vehicle. Perhaps that's because this game, unlike most I played, didn't really present any serious challenge or complexity. Perhaps what makes Chocobo Racing a critically weak video game also has made it a strangely relaxing game to play. To go back to this kart racer aimed at beginners, aimed at a young audience, and run it through its paces once again. We've uploaded a long play of Chocobo Racing for the select extras. We have a link in the description if you'd like to zone out with us or judge for yourself if this is a game you're interested in checking out today. For my part, I probably won't play Chocobo Racing again for years, if ever again. But both for personal reasons and as a way of reminding myself that gaming history is more than just its marquee titles, I'm glad that Chocobo Racing is part of the select titles that I've had the opportunity to revisit. Thanks for watching. If you like our approach to games coverage at The Select, in that our reviews of retro games give even average titles their day in the sun, we would appreciate your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We create videos for The Select that are guided by our personal interests, and your support makes that possible.